I am so genuinely curious how the breathing worked, and I know that's kind of, I'm a question you're getting, but
No, this is the first time. Seriously.
is it really?
Yeah.
How were you making it look like you weren't breathing on your own and still keeping yourself alive?
I think that was the hardest part. That and the voice for me was the hardest, most challenging part of the experience, was making that as authentic and truthful as possible. And then forgetting about it and playing scenes, like just being present.
Yeah.
Having that second nature was really, really tricky. There's a scene which actually got cut from the film where I'm playing with my son and by the pond on our property, and it's post polio, so I'm paralyzed, and my son accidentally falls into the pond and starts kind of flailing around and drowning. This was cut from the film. And obviously I can't move, and I can't shout either. And our wonderful nanny is inside the house, and I have to somehow get her attention. And I ring the bell, but the instinct is to scream and to shout. And it was very, very hard, especially on a close-up, to not start breathing like you would breathe. So instead of it was a strange, very, very difficult thing to keep that breath going in the same rhythm and put all of that panic breath in the face and in the only place where I could express it. It was really, really, really weird. It was like panicking without panicking, which made it even more panicky. It was really strange. Very, very odd.
Like you held yourself like a certain way, like in the sense of is there a way to keep yourself from your stomach going up and down? It's just like...
He didn't hold himself. That's the amazing... He didn't hold himself. He was entirely supported by the chair at all times. So Andrew actually wasn't ever in control of his own posture or anything either.
Right.
So he had to completely relinquish himself entirely.
God, that's crazy.
I know, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know.
But it kept you awake because you were the one that had to make sure I wasn't falling off my chair.
I know.
That you had that responsibility.
A couple of times your head did blob to the side, and that was my fault. And he made me know that was my fault. But yeah, sometimes I chose not to take care of him.
Can you speak on the selfless nature of... I just thought she was so incredibly selfless, and that's what I loved about her so much. Her entire life was dedicated to helping him, but it also made her life better. So I'm curious just finding that selflessness and playing that on screen so naturally. It was amazing.
Don't mean to make myself sound like a nice person, but I do understand it.
Yeah. I'm not saying you're not selfless.
But I get it. I think the amazing thing that she did was she was able to do it without it being a sort of martyr. She was never a martyr,
right.
And she made it very clear that this was a choice that she was making, and it was a choice she was deciding to live her life like this. And also, she's not a saint. And I think Diana would never want to be portrayed as that. But I think that it's more that sort of selflessness. The thing I find more astounding about it is the approach of joy and not wanting for it to drag you down and continuing to have a positive outlook when everything else seems to be going in the opposite direction. Being able to say, well, no, I am hopeful and I do have faith that this something good is going to come out of this. And I think that's the amazing thing. And then the selflessness just comes out of just loving someone and just thinking they're the best thing ever and wanting them to be happy. And
yeah. And I am curious about the voice because I'm curious how you gave it that sound. Was there any? Were there prosthetics on? Like, did you do anything to make it sound the way it did? It just sounded incredible.
Oh, great! I'm glad. I had lots of recordings of Robin in his older age. That was the basis. So I knew that the sound would end up where it ended up. But then I wanted to give it some shape before it got to that very tired, very old, croaky sound. So I worked with a really wonderful dialect coach called Jerry Grinnell on kind of tempering the voice throughout until it arrived at that final destination. And I did have false teeth.
I was wondering that because
but that's unrelated. It was just because Robin had prominent front teeth.
Right, his smile was a leading character in the movie.
Yeah. And you know, Jonathan and Andy were really up for it. I think Andy more so than Jonathan maybe, because Jonathan did inherit the same mouth. But it's a beautiful mouth as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. So no, that was a really interesting thing. But also I wanted to say something about what you were saying about the joy, and there was a place that they seemed to get to where they became acutely aware of the absurdity and the cosmic joke of existence, as opposed to saying, "God, why have you forsaken me?"
Yeah.
It was like, "Oh God, you practical joker, you imbecile! How ridiculous that you've put us in this position, and we're going to laugh right back." There was something kind of. It is just one big joke. It is one big cosmic joke. There's some wisdom in that. There was some, I don't know. I think Robin was able to get to the place of just being a bit of a fool in that very old wise fool kind of way.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. That was a great balance you found. You guys did a phenomenal film, and I love Andy Serkis so much. Robert Richardson, the close-ups, oh my God,
I know,
the POV shots.
Oh my
It was
gosh,
amazing.
he's amazing.
And you know me, I've talked to you over the years about performance capture and just how movies are made. And I'm in this particular film, I'm very curious how the breathing machine worked and how that you had it going.
Right.
Considering Andrew obviously wasn't really using a breathing machine.
Right.
Can you talk about how you filmed that and allowed that to occur?
Yeah, sure. We had to, obviously, you know, when it was in shot, it had to be moving, but we had to make a machine that didn't have any sound. And yet, the sound was very much a part of Diana and Robin's life, because that sound was the third character in the room. It was, and we designed the sound of the respirator to be like almost like. And you know, the thing that's controlling his life at the beginning, but that almost becomes more of a friend as it goes on. So it changed, and the different respirators over the years had different voices, if you like. And by the end, his whole way of speaking, his whole rhythm of speaking was determined by how much air was being pushed into his lungs. So the phraseology of his sentences was all determined by that. But he had to actually have an earbud in his ear to get the sound, because he couldn't see it, and so he had to in order to be able to time it. That's how we worked it out. And then of course when we were shooting on the other person, we then turned the respirator off so it wasn't making any noise. So it was it was very complicated.
That's
actually
really cool how that works. And I was curious, I guess as a director, how you directed him to not look like he was breathing on his own.
That was all Andrew.
I know it's acting, but what did he do? Did he just like move his chest up and down?
Yeah, he's exceptionally brilliant and emotional and visceral and totally in character. But just the technique of that was extraordinary, and he really did pull it off, because you don't see his chest moving at all.
Right.
It's a pretty hard thing to do. And to really focus on just having, not being able to use your hands, not being able to use anything, but just control, But the thing was, Robin was like that. All the energy, having been a very athletic young man, all of that energy went into his face and into his expression, and he had quite an animated face.
Obviously, you have the son producing this film, which is like the coolest thing ever. And I'm curious, obviously, he was at ages where he could remember these things very vividly.
Very much.
And I'm curious, as you're directing these scenes specifically with his character, did he walk you through remembering of the exact moment of doing the certain things he did in the scene? Was that something that you did directing-wise with him?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, Jonathan is a very close friend of mine. He's also the co-founder of the Imaginarium Studios with me. So we've known each other for years. But he was very, as did Diana and all of the other members of the family and close friends, gave so much of themselves in terms of the research and remembering and stories, anecdotes, etc. But Jonathan was also very, he's very much, although it's incredibly close to real life, and there aren't really any events in this movie that didn't happen. There's always that sense of, never let the truth get in the way of a good story, in terms of the poetic license and the cinematography and the way we wanted to, and he was all up for that, and so yes, he would always articulate when how he felt at a certain point, but at the same time we wanted it to work cinematically as well.
I think the sign of a great director is when they use cinematography and score as leading characters, because there's a beautiful balance when you watch a movie where you can appreciate what you're seeing but not lose suspension of disbelief in the story. So I'm just watching these shots, listening to this gorgeous score. Can you talk about utilizing aesthetics like that as characters? Because I mean, we are POV looking up when he's going outside, there's close-ups of the night. Can you just talk about utilizing those as leading characters?
Absolutely. I mean, I always wanted to, my huge influences are of course Peter Jackson, but also Jane Campion actually as filmmakers, and the visceral world that they can take you into. through point of view, and Matt Reeves for that matter, actually, because he does that too. I wanted to create something cinematic. We weren't going to shoot this film on a wobbly cam, kind of true to life sort of video style story. I wanted it to feel like a fairy tale and bigger, like a bigger cinematic experience. And so that was, and then having Bob Richardson come on, who equally wanted to work in that way.
Genius.
He wanted to make every single shot feel support the drama for sure, it being all about that, but actually, like you say, it have its own statement and it tell its own story with each shot. So that was a conscious decision. And then Nitin Sawhney, who's the composer who's written the most extraordinary score, was also working very psychologically and worked from point of view. So it's very much Robin's journey, the spirit of adventure. We had this theme of the sort of spirit of adventure and spirit of living life to the full, which then is interwoven with the love story, which. So they were definitely characters.
They are rapping, but can I ask you one more thing? Do you mind? I'm just curious if Peter Jackson, Matt Reeves have seen the film. Did you?
They haven't yet, and I'm dying to show it to them. But I kind of was wanting to show it to them. Oh no, Matt Reeves has seen it actually.
Really?
Matt saw it at a screening. We did a very, we were doing pickups for Apes, and I showed him a cut when we were there.
Is that nerve-wracking to show another director a cut of your first film?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, absolutely. I really wanted to show it to Peter, but actually, what I really wanted Pete to see was the final product. And in fact, I'm going to email him today before the screening tonight, because I do owe such a lot to him. Him giving me the opportunity to direct the second unit on The Hobbit, for instance.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to let him know that I'm dying for him to see it.
Can't wait. I can't wait to hear his reaction. I want to see Peter Jackson's name on the poster with a quote. Best movie of the year, Sir Peter Jackson. Yeah, good to see you, Andy. Really good to see you.
Congratulations.